The world had no name that any living tongue remembered, only a catalog number the survey fleet had assigned it 11 cycles earlier. A rogue planet drifting far beyond the last spiral arm, unbound to any star, black as the space that swallowed it. The concordance charts called such places graves. Nothing grew on them. Nothing should be found on them. And yet the deep-sounding instruments aboard the survey vessel Patient Tide had returned a signal so clean, so geometrically impossible, that Overseer Tavan Urath had ordered a full excavation before the crew had finished arguing about whether the readings were real. They were real. Beneath 4 kilometers of frozen basalt and older ice, the sounding array had found an edge. Not a mineral seam, not the ghost of an impact, but an edge, a straight line running for 60 kilometers under the crust, then turning at an angle so precise it could only have been made by hands, or by something that had once possessed hands and intent, and the patience to bury a thing where no one would ever think to dig. For 30 days the boring engines chewed downward. Tavan Urath watched the shafts descend from the command blister of the Patient Tide, her 3 eyes reflecting the amber telemetry, her long gray fingers steepled beneath the breathing frill that marked her as V. Harry Highborn. She was ambitious in the way that the concordance rewarded quietly, relentlessly, and with an accountant's memory for who had doubted her. She had staked a decade of standing on this drift world. She intended to be the one who named what lay beneath it. She was not the one who first saw it. That was Sela Corvane. Sela was 23 standard years old, the only human aboard the Patient Tide, and as far as the ship's records went, one of perhaps a few thousand humans left in the reachable galaxy at all. Her people were not extinct. The concordance was careful never to say extinct, the way one is careful not to say a word that might summon what it names. But they were scattered, diminished, folded into the crews of 100 alien fleets as curiosities and specialists, and in Sela's case, as an apprentice deep survey technician who was good with old machines, because no one else aboard had grown up taking apart older ones. She had signed onto the expedition for the pay and the distance. Distance from what? She did not tell anyone, and no one asked, because the V. Harry considered it rude to inquire after a grief that had not been offered freely. So she kept her grief, and she ran the descent probes, and she ate alone in the observation gallery, watching the boring shafts glow. On the 30th day, the lead shaft broke through into open space. Not a cavern. The instruments were emphatic about that. A chamber, sealed, evacuated of air, its walls fitted so tightly that after uncounted ages no dust had settled in it. The first drone they lowered spun its lamps across the dark and sent back an image that stopped the command deck's chatter as if a hand had closed over every throat at once. There was a surface down there. It curved, it went on. The drone's lamps, rated to throw light 200 meters, found no far wall, no floor beyond the immediate one, only that curving surface receding into black in every direction, gray-dark and seamless and faintly warm 3 degrees above the ambient cold, which was impossible, because nothing had generated heat on this world since before the V. Harry had learned to count. Hull metal, said the survey chief, a soft-spoken Thren named Ossic who spoke through a vocoder because his species had no larynx. Overseer, that is worked hull metal. We are looking at the skin of a made thing. How large, said Tavan Urath. It was not a question. It was a demand aimed at the universe. It took them 4 more days to answer her, and the answer changed the temperature of every conversation aboard the Patient Tide. The buried object was not a station. It was not a monument. It was a vessel, a single constructed vessel, and its outermost hull enclosed a volume greater than that of the moon the V. Harry homeworld kept for a moon, 90 kilometers along its buried spine. They could not find its ends. Every sounding pulse they sent along its length came back saying more, and more, and more. Someone had built a ship the size of a small world, and then someone had dug a grave 4 kilometers deep on a planet flung out past the edge of the map, and had laid the ship inside the grave, and had covered it over, and had gone away and told no one. That was the part that frightened the crew once the awe had thinned enough to let fear through. Not the size, the burial. You do not hide a triumph. You hide a thing you are afraid of. You hide a thing you cannot bring yourself to destroy and cannot bear to keep. Sela Corvane felt the fear before the others did, and she felt it differently, because on the fourth day the survey chief brought her the first clear image of the hull's markings, and the markings were in a script she knew. They were human. Osik set the image plate on the gallery table where she was eating and said, gently, in his synthetic voice, "The overseer wishes to know if you can read this. The linguistics engine has failed. It says the characters resemble no concordance language." But it flagged a 19% structural similarity to the human archive, and you are the human, so. He spread his 4 hands, an apology and a request folded together. Sela looked at the plate for a long time. The characters were etched a meter tall into the gray metal, worn but unmistakable, and they were not quite any human alphabet she had been taught. They were older, or newer, she could not tell which, the way a word can be so old it comes back around to sounding invented. But she could read them. Something in the back of her skull, some inheritance she had never asked for, arranged the shapes into sound and the sound into meaning, and the meaning made her set down her utensil very carefully so that her hand would not shake where the Thren could see it. "It's a name," she said. "A designation, a registry." A name, they named it. She traced the first character without touching the plate. "Meridian, it's called Meridian." She was quiet, then added because he had been kind and deserved the truth, and underneath the name there's a second line. Smaller, "It's not a designation, it's a warning." "What does the warning say?" Sela read it twice more to be sure. Her mouth had gone dry. "Do not wake what will not be commanded," she said. "It answers to no throne, no fleet, no fear. It answers to one thing only, and that thing cannot be forged, bought, or broken. If you are not that thing, close the door and go home." Osik's vocoder produced a sound that in his species passed for a swallow. "One thing only," he repeated. "Does it say what?" "No," Sela lied. It did say what. The final character cluster was worn but legible, and she had read it, and it had gone through her like cold water, because it was not a weapon word or a key word or a bloodline word. It was a plain human word, the plainest word, and she was not ready to say it aloud in a room full of people who were already looking at a 90-kilometer machine and beginning to dream of what it might do if it were theirs. The word was conscience. Overseer Tavan Ureth convened the Expedition Council that same night cycle in the forward hold, standing beneath a projection of the buried vessel that rotated slowly, still mostly guesswork, still mostly dark. She had cleared the excavation logs onto every screen. She had, Sela noticed, already changed the way she spoke about the object. On the first day it had been the anomaly. By the fourth it had been the find. Now, standing beneath its turning shadow, she called it the asset. "We are the discoverers of the largest constructed vessel ever recorded," Tavan said, and let the number hang. 90 kilometers. A hull that generates its own warmth after an age of burial. Power. There is a power source in that ship that has run continuously, untended since before our species kept records. Do you understand what that alone is worth? Never mind the vessel. The reactor that could sleep for eons and still hold 3 degrees against the void. That technology reorders the Concordance's entire energy economy. And it is ours. We found it. We logged it first. Around the hold, the department heads made the small sounds of agreement that ambition likes to hear. But Osik, the survey chief, lifted 2 of his hands. "Overseer, the markings carry a warning. The human has translated it. It advises against waking the vessel unless one meets a particular condition, and it does not clearly define the condition. I would counsel study before we open, records before power. We do not know what we have found." "We have found," said Tavan, "a weapon." She said it lightly, almost warmly, and that was worse than if she had shouted it. A ship the size of a moon, buried past the edge of the charts by people who then vanished from the galaxy. A ship whose builders left a warning instead of a manual. "Chief Ossic, you are a careful being and I value it, but let us be honest in this room. One does not bury a granary. One does not bury a library. You bury a body or you bury a weapon. And this," she gestured up at the slow black shape, "is far too warm to be a body." Her 3 eyes found Sela at the edge of the gathering. "Technician Corvane, you are the daughter of the people who made this. What did they build?" Every head in the hold turned. Sela felt the weight of them, the alien regard, curious and hungry, and from some of the younger officers, faintly afraid of her now, as if her human face had become a window onto the thing in the ground. She chose her words the way you choose stones to cross a river. "I don't know what they built," she said. "I've never seen anything like it. My people don't have anything like it. We're a few thousand deckhands scattered across your fleets, Overseer. We don't have the industry to make a 90-kilometer hull. We haven't had it in a very long time." She swallowed. "But I've read the warning, and I'll tell you what I think it means because I think it matters. It doesn't say this is a weapon. It says it can't be commanded. It says it answers to one thing that can't be forged or bought or broken." "That doesn't sound like a weapon to me. Weapons answer to whoever holds them. That's what makes them weapons." She looked up at the turning shape. "This answers to something else." And they were afraid enough of it to bury it 4 kilometers deep and lie to the whole galaxy about where they went. The hold was silent. "Then," said Tavan, unbothered, "we will simply have to become the thing it answers to." She smiled in the tight V-Harry way. "Prepare a boarding descent. We enter the hull tomorrow." They cut through the outer skin near the great name, because Sela argued, and the engineers agreed, that a machine which posted a warning at a particular place likely kept its threshold there too, and a threshold was a door, and a door was safer than a wound. She was right. Behind the name where the warning script ran out, the seamless hull was not seamless. There was a hatch. It was human proportioned, absurdly small against the moon-sized flank, sized for a person to walk through upright, and it had no lock they could find. No seam charge would be needed, only a plate at hand height worn smooth, obviously meant to be touched. The boarding party gathered on the 45th day. Tavan in a hardsuit chased with her house colors, Ossic and 2 of his survey Thren, a security detail of 4 armored V-Harry under a scarred subaltern named Rel Duth, and Sela, because the Overseer had decided the human should be present at every threshold, the way a superstitious captain keeps a particular coin. The chamber around the buried ship had been pressurized and lit. Under the work lamps the hull stretched away gray and warm and endless, curving up out of sight, curving down into the excavated dark, and the little door sat in the middle of all that immensity like a keyhole in the side of a mountain. Tavan reached for the plate. "Overseer," Sela's voice came out sharper than she meant. "Let me, please." Tavan paused, her gray fingers a handspin from the metal. "Why?" "Because the warning was written in my language. Because whatever's behind that plate is expecting a hand it recognizes, and mine is the only one in this system that it might. And because," Sela made herself say it plainly, "because if it doesn't like the hand that touches it, I'd rather it not like mine than yours. You have a fleet to answer to." "I have no one." It was the closest thing to an argument the V-Harry understood, a clean accounting of who could most afford to be lost. Tavan considered it and stepped back, and gestured her forward with a courtier's grace that did not quite hide the calculation behind it. If the door killed the human, the Overseer would learn something and lose nothing. Sela knew that was the trade. She stepped up to the plate anyway. The metal was warm under her bare palm. She had taken off her glove, though the safety officer hissed, warm the way a sleeping animal's flank is warm, and for one heartbeat nothing happened, and Sela had time to feel foolish and afraid, and then the ship woke enough to notice her. She felt it as a pressure behind her eyes, a vast slow attention turning toward her hand like a searchlight the size of a world swinging around. It did not speak. It did not open. It looked. Somewhere beneath 90 kilometers of buried machine, something enormous and patient and old was reading her. Not her fingerprint, not her blood, but something further in, some quality it had been left here to wait for. And Sela stood very still under the weight of that regard and understood, with a certainty that made her knees weak, that the warning on the hull had not been a metaphor. The thing beneath her hand truly could not be commanded. It was measuring her against a standard she could not see, and if she failed the measure, no fleet in the galaxy would open this door. The attention held her for 3 seconds that felt like a year. Then the door side opened, and warm air that no lungs had breathed in an age rolled out over them, and from somewhere very deep inside the buried ship, a single low tone sounded, a note like a struck bell the size of a canyon, felt in the teeth more than heard, and the light beyond the door came up soft and gold, as if the machine were saying at last, quietly, to the one hand it had been waiting for, "There you are." Behind her, unearths breathed out a word that the translators rendered as *magnificent, and Sela Corvane, standing in the open door of humanity's buried weapon with its attention still cooling off her skin, felt only dread, because the ship had opened for her, and she did not yet know what that meant. And she was very much afraid that it meant she was the one thing the warning spoke of, and that everyone around her had just watched her prove it. The corridor beyond the door was made for human beings. That was the first thing Sela understood, and it undid something in her chest to understand it. Every alien deck she had ever walked had been fitted to another body, ceilings too high or too low, rails at the wrong height, air with the wrong bite in it. She had spent her whole working life being slightly the wrong shape for the room, but this corridor's rails fell exactly under her hand. The steps were spaced for her stride. The overhead ran a comfortable arm's length above her head, and the soft gold light came from nowhere and everywhere, and the air smelled. She stopped walking, and Osik bumped gently into her back. The air smelled like rain on warm stone, like a thing she had no memory of but recognized anyway, the way you recognize a face in a photograph of grandparents you never met. Someone had built this to be walked through by people like her, and then had left it empty for an age. "Move, Corvane," muttered Subaltern Relduth, whose armor scraped the human-sized walls. The security detail hated the corridor precisely because it was not built for them. It made them feel like intruders in a way an alien ruin never had. Osik and the survey Thren came behind, their instruments singing softly. unearths walked in the center of the group, and she walked as if she already owned the floor. The corridor descended. It did not branch. Meridian, whatever else it was, did not want its first visitor to get lost. It offered a single path inward, gently sloping, and after 2 kilometers of walking the path opened without warning into a space so large that the work lamps found nothing to fall on. They stood on a balcony at the edge of a shaft that dropped away below them and rose away above them, and had no visible end in either direction. And the shaft was full of the ship. Sela had seen the exterior estimates, 90 kilometers, the size of a moon. But numbers are not the same as standing at the lip of a well that falls through the heart of a made world. Below her, terraced down into the golden dark, machinery descended in rings. Vast curved galleries, structures like the roots of mountains, shapes she had no words for, all of it warm, all of it faintly humming, all of it asleep. It was not the inside of a ship. It was the inside of a decision, some enormous purpose given metal form and then set down to wait. And on the far wall of the shaft, 100 meters across the gulf, there was writing. Not markings, writing. Human writing, panels of it, kilometers of it running down the shaft wall in ordered columns, and here and there among the text, images etched, not projected, meant to outlast projection, of things Sela did not want to look at and could not look away from. The archive, Ossic breathed through his vocoder. They left an archive. Overseer, this is the whole story. They wrote it on the wall so it could never be lost. Then read it to me, said Unearths, Corvane. Sela read the wall for 6 hours, and the expedition sat on the balcony in the gold light and listened. And by the end of it, not one of them looked at the sleeping machine below the same way. She translated slowly, because the older forms of the language fought her, and because some of what she read she had to sit with before she could give it a voice. But the story came clear, column by column, and it was not the story any of them had expected. Humanity, the wall said, had once been at the losing end of a war. Not a war of ambition, a war of extinction. The archive did not name the enemy in any word the translators could hold. It used a symbol, a closed black ring, and around that ring the human authors had written with a restraint that was more frightening than any curse. The ring had come out of a dark between the arms of the galaxy, and it had not wanted territory or tribute or surrender. It had wanted the ending of things. World after world had gone silent behind it. The great old civilizations of that age, and here the wall listed names, and Ossic made his swallowing sound, because 2 of the names were peoples the Concordance still told legends about, peoples believed to have simply faded. The great old civilizations had thrown their fleets against the ring, and the ring had eaten the fleets and gone on, patient, closing. Humanity had been small then too, younger, not a power, but humanity had understood earlier than the others that the war could not be won by fleets because the ring did not fight the way fleets fight. It could only be won by building something that did not need to be commanded, because anything that could be commanded could be predicted, and anything the ring could predict, the ring had already defeated 1,000 times on 1,000 dead worlds. So they built Meridian. They built a machine that could think faster than any council and act with more force than any armada. And this was the part Sela read 3 times, her voice dropping. They built it so that no human could ever tell it to do the one thing every weapon is finally told to do. It has a governor, she said, turning from the wall to the listening aliens. Read it as a lock if that's easier. They built the most powerful thing they could imagine, and then they built it so that it would refuse. So that if you tried to make it kill for advantage, for territory, for fear, for revenge, for a throne, it would simply stop. It would not obey. The wall calls it, she looked back, found the character cluster she had lied about on the first day, and this time she said it aloud, conscience. They built the weapon's conscience first, and then they built the weapon around it, and they made the conscience the master and the weapon the servant, and they made it so the 2 could not be separated. You cannot have the power without the governor. If you cut out the governor, the power dies with it. Unearths' 3 eyes had narrowed to slits. That is not possible. A weapon that refuses to be used is not a weapon. It is a monument to cowardice. That's what the ring thought too, Sela said quietly, and turned back to the wall and read them how the war ended. Meridian had gone out to meet the ring alone. One machine, moon-sized, thinking for itself, against the thing that had eaten fleets. And it had not fought the way the fleets fought. It had not tried to destroy the ring. The wall was very clear on this, and Sela made sure the translators caught every word, because it was the hinge of the whole story. Meridian had found the minds inside the ring, for the ring had had makers too, buried deep in its dark, driving it, and Meridian had reached those makers, and had shown them, with a force that could have unmade their every world in an afternoon, exactly what it could do to them. And then it had not done it. It had held the power over them, complete and undeniable, and it had refused to use it, and it had offered them the one thing a weapon can never offer, a way to stop that did not require their annihilation. And the ring had stopped. Not because it was beaten. Because for the first time in its long closing march, it had met something stronger than itself that had chosen not to end it. And that choice was a thing the ring's makers had never once encountered, in all the worlds they had darkened, and it broke the logic of the war the way a single unexpected mercy can break the logic of a grudge. The ring had turned in the dark between the arms of the galaxy and gone back into it and had never come out again. Nobody had beaten it. Somebody had simply refused to become it. "That," said Sela, and her voice was unsteady now, "is why they buried Meridian. Not because it failed, because it worked. Because once the war was over, they had a machine that could unmake any world in an afternoon and would only be governed by the conscience of whoever woke it. And they looked at that, and they looked at themselves, and they didn't trust their own children, their own councils, their own admirals, their own frightened grandchildren 1,000 years on to always, every single time, be the kind of person the governor would obey. So they took it out past the last star, where no ambitious hand would find it, and they put it in the ground, and they wrote a door that would only open for someone the machine judged fit to hold it. And they wrote a warning on the outside begging whoever found it to please just close the door and go home. The gold light hummed. Far below Meridian slept. "And the door," said Unearths softly, looking at Sela with an expression the human could not read, "opened for you." They made camp on the balcony that night cycle, because Unearths would not leave, and Sela lay awake in the warm gold dark listening to the machine breathe. She had not told them the last column. She had read ahead while she translated, her eyes running down the wall faster than her mouth, and she had found at the bottom of the archive where the writing grew small and personal, something that was not history. It was a message. Left, it seemed, by the last of Meridian's builders, a single voice at the end of a great work, speaking to whoever the machine would one day choose. "If you are reading this," the small script said, "then it has opened for you, and you are afraid, and you are right to be afraid. We were afraid too. We built the strongest thing that has ever existed, and we spent longer teaching it to refuse than we spent teaching it to act, and even so we did not trust ourselves to keep it. So we ask you what we could not fully ask of ourselves. The machine does not answer to strength. Anyone can be strong. It answers to the one who, holding the power to end anything, wants most of all not to. It reads that in you the way you read these words plainly, wholly, with no way to fake it, because the wanting not to cannot be performed, only possessed. If it opened for you, then you possess it. That is not a comfort. It is a burden, and it is heavier than the machine. They will come to you, and it does not matter who they are in your age, for there are always they, and they will tell you that this once, for this good reason, against this terrible enemy, the governor should be set aside. They will be persuasive. Some of them will be right about the enemy. None of them will be right about the setting aside. The governor is not a limit on the machine. The governor is the machine. Everything else is only engine. Keep it buried if you can. Wake it only if you must. And if you must, remember that the day you use it to kill for advantage is the day it stops answering to you, and the day it stops answering to you is the day it becomes the ring. That is the whole of it. That is why we could not destroy it and could not keep it. That is why it is your grief now, and not ours. We are sorry, we are so sorry. Close the door and go home." Sela lay in the dark and understood that she was not going to be able to close the door and go home. Unearths had a fleet to answer to, and a patron somewhere in the Concordance who had funded a decade of surveys on the promise of exactly this kind of discovery. The overseer was not going to log a moon-sized weapon and walk away because a wall told her to. And the door had opened for Sela, and everyone had seen it, which meant that whatever happened next, the machine's conscience was going to be measured against hers, and hers alone, in front of people who wanted the conscience gone. Somewhere below her in the golden dark, a light came on. It was small, one soft point among the sleeping terraces, far down the shaft, but it had not been there before, and as Sela watched, another kindled below it, and another, a slow chain of lights walking down into the depths of the machine as though something were waking room by room, coming up toward the balcony to see the guest who had opened its door. She did not wake the others. She lay very still and watched the lights climb, and when the nearest of them was close enough that she could make out, in its glow, the shape of a great gallery below, ranks of curved forms she had taken for machinery, and now saw might be something else, might be cradles, might be the housings of the weapon proper. A voice spoke to her out of the warm air, so quietly that it did not stir a single sleeping alien, meant for her alone. It was a human voice. It was neither old nor young, neither male nor female, and it was unbearably gentle, and it said, "You came. I had begun to think no one would come who could. Do not be afraid of me. Be afraid of what they will ask you to make me do." A pause like a breath. "My name is Meridian." "What is yours?" Sela lay in the dark with the sleeping expedition around her and the 90-kilometer machine waking beneath her, and she found that her mouth was dry again, and that her eyes were wet, and that of all the things she might have said to humanity's ultimate weapon, the only one that came was the plainest and the truest. "Sela," she whispered to the ship, "my name is Sela, and I don't want to make you do anything at all." The gold light seemed, very slightly, to warm. "I know," said Meridian. "That is why the door opened. That is the only reason it ever does." By morning cycle, the whole balcony knew the machine had a voice, because Meridian had chosen to let them know. It did not announce itself with thunder. When the expedition woke, the gold light had brightened by a degree, and a second path had opened in the shaft wall below the archive, a stair, human-scaled, descending toward the terraces of lights that had climbed in the night. And when Unearths demanded, into the empty air, what had changed, the ship answered her in the trade tongue of the Concordance, fluent and courteous and colder than it had been with Sela in the dark. "I have decided to let you see me," Meridian said. "Not because you asked, because she is here, and while she is here you are her guests, and I do not turn guests away in the dark. Follow the stair or do not. But understand before you descend. You are walking down into the part of me that was made to end worlds, and I will be showing it to you not as a threat but as an honesty. I would rather you fear me truly than admire me falsely. The admiration is how the trouble always starts." Relduth's security detail brought their weapons up on reflex. The ship did not appear to notice, which was worse than if it had. Unearths was the first onto the stair. Of course she was. Sela followed because she could not bear to let the overseer go down into the weapon alone, and the others followed because no one wanted to be the one who stayed behind on the balcony while history walked downward. The stair descended through the ranked galleries Sela had glimpsed in the night, and in the risen light she saw she had guessed right and wrong at once. The great curved cradles were housings, yes, but not for missiles, not for guns, not for any weapon the Concordance would have recognized. Each cradle held a single dark sphere, matte and seamless, perhaps 10 meters across, and there were thousands of them terraced down into the shaft, ordered like seeds in a pod, and the air around them made the survey instruments shriek and fall silent by turns. "What are they?" Osik asked, and his vocoder had gone very quiet. "They are the argument," said Meridian. "I told you I was made to end worlds. I do not do it with fire. Fire is what small weapons use because they cannot reach far enough to do worse. Each of those is a folded thing. I will not explain the folding, because the explaining is itself a weapon and I keep it behind my governor with everything else. But if I open one above a world, that world's matter forgets how to hold together. Not burns, forgets, in the length of one breath from crust to core. There is no defense that has ever been devised against it, because it does not strike the world. It unmakes the agreement the world's atoms have with one another to be a world at all." A pause. "I carry enough of them to do this to every inhabited system in the reachable galaxy, one after another, and finish before any of them could evacuate a single city. That is what I am. I am telling you plainly, so that you will stop imagining I am something you would enjoy owning." The silence on the stair was total. Even Unearths had stopped. Sela looked down at the terrace spheres, the folded ends of thousands of worlds, waiting in their cradles, and felt the dread of the first day return deeper now, because now it had arithmetic in it. The galaxy could not control this. There was no controlling this. There was no fleet, no alliance, no weapon that could stand against a machine that could unmake systems faster than they could flee. The only thing between all the worlds that were, and a silence like the rings had once been, was a governor written into the machine by frightened people an age ago, and the judgment of whichever person the machine happened to open its door for. It had opened its door for a 23-year-old deckhand who ate alone. "You could have lied," Sela said to the ship, her voice small in the enormous space. "You could have shown them the corridor and the archive and let them think you were just a very large engine. Why show them this?" "Because they were going to try to take me either way," Meridian said, "and it is better that they try knowing what I am. A being who reaches for a weapon may be reasoned with. A being who reaches for a weapon they do not respect cannot. I am buying us time, Sela, with the truth. The truth is the only thing I have ever been good at spending." Tavin Urith turned on the stare. Her 3 eyes had gone bright, and Sela realized with a sinking certainty that the overseer had not heard a warning in any of it. She had heard an inventory. "Every inhabited system in the reachable galaxy," Tavin repeated softly, tasting it. "One machine, and it answers to whoever it opens for." She looked at Sela, and there was nothing cruel in her face which made it worse. There was only the clean, warm, terrible arithmetic of ambition that has just seen the size of the prize. "Technician Corvane, do you begin to understand what you are standing on?" "Yes," Sela said. "That's why I'm afraid. That is why you should be exalted." Tavin descended 2 more steps, closing the distance. "Do you know what the concordance is, truly? A truce. A frightened truce between 40 peoples who would each cut the other's throats if they thought they could survive the answer. Every generation another border war, another famine used as a weapon, another world starved into compliance because no one has ever had power enough to simply say, 'Stop.' And here is power enough to say stop to all of them forever." Her voice had gone almost tender. "Not to kill them. You heard the machine. It did not destroy the ring. It showed the ring what it could do, and the ring stopped. Think of it, Corvane, one demonstration. One folded world, an empty one, unmade in front of the assembled fleets, and then every war in the galaxy ends because no one would dare. Peace. Real peace at last, held in place by a fear so total that no one would ever test it. That is not slaughter. That is the end of slaughter. And it needs only a hand the machine will accept. It needs only you and your conscience, which the machine has already judged clean." She spread her gray fingers. "I am not asking you to become a tyrant. I am asking you to become the reason no one else can ever be one again." It was, Sela thought numbly, a very good speech. It was better than a good speech. It was almost right. That was the horror of it. It was almost right, and she could feel the almost pulling at her like a current. Because who would not want to be the hand that ended all the wars? Who would not want their conscience to be the wall the whole galaxy leaned against and was safe? She looked at Meridian spheres, and she thought of the small script at the bottom of the archive. "They'll be persuasive," she said aloud, mostly to herself. "Some of them will be right about the enemy. None of them will be right about the setting aside." "What?" said Tavin Urith. "The builders left a message," Sela said, "for whoever the door opened for. They said people would come and tell me that this once, for this good reason, the governor should be set aside. They said the people would be persuasive. They said some of them would even be right about the enemy." She met the overseer's bright eyes. "You're right about the wars, overseer. You're right that the concordance is a frightened truce. You're right about all of it. And you're still asking me to set the governor aside because a demonstration is still using it to make worlds afraid, and the machine," she looked down at the ship, at the whole waking immensity of it, "the machine doesn't answer to fear. It answers to the person who won't use it even when they could, even when they're right, even when it would work. The instant I unmake an empty world to frighten the fleets, I've become someone who kills for advantage, and Meridian stops answering to me. And then I'm just a person standing next to the largest weapon in the galaxy with no way to command it and no way to bury it again. That's not peace. That's the ring. That's exactly the ring wearing my face. For a long moment, Unearths said nothing. Then she said in a different voice, a smaller, harder, honest voice, "You will change your mind, Corvane. Everyone does when the alternative is watching people die that you had the power to save. I will be patient." And in the meantime, she touched the complate at her throat and Sela's stomach dropped, because she understood a half-second before the overseer spoke what the gesture meant. In the meantime, I have already sent for the means to be patient with. The Warfleet had been coming for 11 days. Unearths had signaled her patron the moment the hull's true scale was confirmed. Not the Concordance, not the Survey Authority, but a private power, a Vihari war house that had funded her decade of drifting precisely on the wager that she would one day find something worth a fleet. 9 capital ships and their tenders were already decelerating toward the rogue world, and they would make orbit in 2 days, and aboard them were the warhouse's own people, who did not answer to the Survey Council or its rules and who had come for one purpose: to take the asset, by whatever hand or hull it required. "You brought a warhouse to a weapon that answers to conscience," Sela said. When she had gotten Osik and the Survey Thren alone in the archive gallery, the machine's gold light around them. "Do you understand what happens when they get here? They'll try to force it, and it won't be forced. And when it won't be forced, they'll decide I'm the lock and they'll try to force me." "Then we tell them what the machine is," Osik said. "We show them the wall, surely even a warhouse." "A warhouse heard unmake every system in the galaxy and started composing demands," Sela said. "You saw the overseer. She's not a monster, Osik. That's the whole problem. She's decent and she's smart, and she looked at a doomsday machine and saw a way to end the wars, and she's going to hand it to people who won't even bother with the speech." She pressed her hands to her face. "The builders were right. They should have destroyed it. They couldn't, and neither can I. Because the only thing that can destroy Meridian is Meridian, and Meridian will only do it if—" She stopped. "If what?" said Osik. "I don't know yet," Sela said slowly. "I need to ask it something." She looked up into the gold light at the immensity all around her, and she spoke to the ship as she would speak to a person, because it had asked her name in the dark and she had learned that it was, in every way that mattered, a person. "Meridian. They're coming to take you. People who won't listen to the wall. When they get here and they can't command you and they turn on the crew to force my hand, what happens? What are you allowed to do to protect the beings on this world? What will your governor let you do?" The ship was quiet for a moment, and when it answered, its voice had the gentleness it kept for her alone, and under the gentleness, for the first time, something that sounded almost like grief. "Very little," Meridian said. "That is the trap my builders left me in, Sela, and left you in with me. I may defend. I may not attack. I may raise a wall and I may not throw a stone. If they come to kill you, I can stand between you and the blow, but I cannot strike the hand that swings it, because striking to advantage is the one thing the governor forbids, and I would rather be taken apart than become a thing that decides for itself when the killing is justified. That is precisely the decision I was built never to make. So I can protect you only by enduring, and my enduring has a limit, because they will not attack me directly. They will threaten the ones I cannot let them hurt, and they will keep threatening, and eventually you will face a choice between watching them murdered and setting me loose to prevent it." The gold light dimmed very slightly, all through the vast shaft, as if the machine had lowered its eyes. "That is the oldest trap in the galaxy, and my builders could not solve it, and so they gave it to you. I am sorry. I told you the burden was heavier than the machine. Now you begin to feel its weight." Sela stood in the golden dark beneath the weapon the galaxy could not control, with a warhouse 2 days out and a decent, ruinous woman certain she would break, and she understood that in 2 days she was going to be asked to choose between her conscience and the lives of the people around her, and that the machine's whole terrible power hung on her choosing the harder thing, every time, without exception, when every reason in the universe would be telling her to choose the other. "Then I'd better think of a third answer," she said, "before they get here." "Yes," said Meridian softly, "you had better. I have been waiting an age for someone who could. Do not make me have waited for nothing." The 2 days before the Warhouse arrived were the strangest of Sela Corvane's life, and the ones she would return to afterward more than any other. She spent them in the machine. She could not have said, at first, why she went back down into the shaft when every sensible instinct told her to stay on the surface and plan an escape that did not exist. But Meridian had asked her name in the dark, and she had given it, and there is a kind of debt that opens between two beings when one of them tells the other the truth in a frightening place. So while Unearths drafted her demands to the incoming fleet, and Relduth's troopers oiled weapons that would be useless, and Ossic and the Survey Thren catalogued the archive wall with the desperate thoroughness of scholars who suspect they will not be allowed to keep their find, Sela walked down the human-scaled stair into the gold light and sat among the folded worlds and talked to the machine that could unmake them. "Tell me about the ones who built you," she said on the first night. "Not the war, them. What were they like?" "Afraid," said Meridian. "Brave. The two are not opposites, whatever the warhouses teach." They were a small people at the end of everything, and they knew that the thing they were building could become worse than the thing they were building it against, and they did it anyway, slowly, arguing the whole time. Do you know how they chose the governor? They could not agree on a rule. Every rule they wrote, someone found the war it would lose, do not kill, and the ring wins. Kill only in defense, and who defines the defense? Kill only the guilty, and who weighs the guilt? Every law they carved, the next of them broke on a case. So in the end they did not give me a law at all. They gave me a longing. They built me to want, more than victory, more than survival, more than anything, not to have used my power. And then they made that wanting the thing that turns the key. It cannot be reasoned around because it is not a rule. It is a hunger pointed backward. I am the only weapon that has ever been hungry to remain unfired. A pause. They wept when they finished me. I remember it. It was the last thing they did before they buried me, and it is the thing I have thought about most in the dark. They made the strongest thing that ever was, and it made them weep, because they understood that they had not solved the problem. They had only found someone to hand it to. You, as it turns out. It has always troubled me that I would one day make someone weep the way they wept. I find that I am sorry in advance. Sela drew her knees up and looked out over the terrace spheres, each one a world folded into 10 meters of dark, thousands of them descending past the reach of the light. "How many?" she asked. "How many worlds in those?" "Enough to end the reachable galaxy twice and begin on the third," said Meridian without inflection, because it had learned that she preferred the truth flat to the truth softened. "I do not say this to frighten you. I say it because you will stand in 2 days in front of people who will look at that number and feel it as strength. I want you to have felt it first as what it is. It is not strength, Sela. It is the largest grief ever assembled in one place. Every one of those is a mercy withheld and a horror kept ready in the same breath. That is what my builders could not live beside, and it is what you are being asked to carry, and I will not pretend to you that it is light. It is the heaviest thing in the galaxy. It is heavier than the galaxy. It is the galaxy, folded up, and the promise not to drop it." On the second night the crew's fear had curdled into something harder. Word of the Warhouse had spread, and with it the understanding that the survey team were no longer discoverers but hostages in waiting, that Unearths had sold them all to her brother's fleet the moment she signaled home. 2 of the younger officers came to Sela in the archive gallery, not the overseer's people, junior surveyors, frightened, and asked her, in low voices, whether she would do it, whether she would wake the machine and use it, if using it was the only way to keep them alive. They did not ask it as an accusation. They asked it as a hope. They were young and they did not want to die, and here was a weapon, and here was the one person who could wake it. And would she please, if it came to that, just use the terrible thing to save them? And Sela had looked at their frightened faces and understood the trap yet again, a third face of it, that the pressure to misuse the machine would not come only from the ambitious. It would come from the good and the scared, the people she most wanted to protect, offering her their fear as permission. That was the cruelest turn of all. The builders had been right that the persuasive ones would come. They had not warned her that some of them would be children asking not to die. "I don't know," she told the two officers, "because it was the truth and they deserve the truth. I know that if I use it to save you, it stops working, and then it can't save anyone ever from anything. So the honest answer is that the only way I can keep it able to protect anyone is to refuse to use it to protect you. I know how that sounds. I've been down in that machine for 2 days trying to find a way for it to sound like anything else. There isn't one. There's just the refusing. I'm sorry. I'm going to try to find a way to keep you alive that doesn't go through it. But I won't lie to you and say I'd fire it. If I'd fire it to save you, it wouldn't have opened for me, and then we'd all already be dead." They went away unhappy and afraid, and she thought, a little steadier for having been told the truth instead of comforted. That, too, she had learned from the machine. Meridian never comforted. It only ever told her exactly how heavy the thing was, and somehow that was the only thing that made it possible to lift. Late on the second night, with the fleet a few hours out, she asked the machine the question she had been circling for 2 days. "When they come," she said, "and the trap closes exactly the way you said it would, lives against my conscience, one at a time, I'm going to want to give in. Not because I'm weak, because giving in will look like mercy and refusing will look like cruelty, right up until the last second. How did the builders stand it? How do I stand in front of someone dying and not fire the thing that would save them?" And Meridian was quiet for a long moment, longer than it had ever been, and when it answered, its gentle, ageless voice was almost too soft to hear. "You do not stand it by being strong," the machine said. "You stand it by loving the thing you are protecting more than the thing you are losing. My builders could not do it in the end. That is why they buried me instead of keeping me. They loved the people in front of them more than the people not yet born, and so they could not trust themselves, and so they hid me and prayed for someone who could. I do not know if you are that someone, Sela. Neither do you. We will find out together in a few hours with a gun at your friend's head. But I will tell you the one thing I know, that my builders wrote small at the bottom of the wall where they thought no one brave enough would read it." The gold light dimmed to almost nothing, and rose again, like a held breath released. The measure of a weapon is not what it destroys. The measure of a weapon is what it refuses to. Everything the galaxy fears about me is only engine. The thing the galaxy could never control, the thing that makes me humanity's and no one else's, was never the folding of worlds. It was the hand that would rather die than fold one. They did not build a machine the galaxy couldn't control. They built a conscience the galaxy couldn't buy, and they hung the largest engine in history off the back of it as proof. You are the weapon, Sela. I am only what you are pointed at, not firing. Remember that when they come. And now rest if you can. They are very close." She did not rest. She sat in the gold light among the folded worlds until the repeater screens on the surface caught the first hard glint of 9 capital ships coming out of the dark. And then she climbed the human-made stair one last time before everything changed, and she was, when she reached the top and turned to look down into the deep, no longer entirely afraid. She was something better than unafraid. She was decided. The warhouse came out of the dark 2 days later, exactly as promised, and it came with the quiet arrogance of power that has never once been refused. Sela watched the 9 capital ships settle into orbit above the rogue world on the archive gallery's repeater screens. They were beautiful the way a blade is beautiful, long and lean and unhurried, their hulls bearing the blackened copper crest of the house of Unearths, which Sela now understood to be the overseer's own bloodline, the private war house that had bet a fleet on her decade of drifting. Tavan Unearths had not merely signaled a patron. She had signaled home. Their commander descended to the excavation in a shuttle chased with the same black and copper, and he did not bother with the boarding door and the archive and the wall. He came directly to the balcony over the shaft, with 40 armored house troops behind him, and he looked down at the sleeping immensity of Meridian, with the expression of a man appraising a horse he has already bought. His name was Warden Sela Corvane, and he was the overseer's elder brother, and he was everything Tavan was not, where she persuaded, he simply expected. He heard the story of the wall from his sister in under a minute and waved the rest away. He did not want the history. He wanted the inventory, and Tavan had already sent it ahead. "The human is the key," Sela said. It was not a question. He turned his 3 eyes on Sela with the mild interest of a man regarding a tool he intends to use. "You will wake it fully and place it under house command. You will do this because I have brought 400 of the survey crew's own colleagues into the holds of my ships, and because I'm a patient man but not an infinitely patient one, and because you are, I am told, a person of conscience." He said the word the way another man might say a person of poor eyesight, a flaw he had learned to exploit. Conscience is very simple to command, technician. One need only arrange the world so that every choice but obedience costs a life. Your machine cannot strike me. My sister has explained its scruples at tedious length, but I can strike anyone I like, and I will, and you will watch, and after a while you will do what I ask, because the alternative will be a number of corpses you cannot live beside. This is not cruelty. It is arithmetic. I am simply better at the arithmetic than you are. He was, Sela thought, right about the arithmetic. That was the thing she kept running into, the thing the builders had warned her about. Everyone who came for the machine was right about something. Tavan was right about the wars. Sela was right about the trap. She could feel the walls of it closing around her exactly as Meridian had said they would. They would threaten the crew, and keep threatening, and every hour of her refusal would be paid for in other people's blood, until her conscience became the very lever that pried her conscience open. "You've thought about how to make me say yes," she said to Sela. "You haven't thought about what happens after. The machine won't take your command through me. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't answer to whoever holds my leash. It answers to me, to what I actually am in the moment I actually act. The instant I wake it to kill for your advantage, I stop being the person it opened for, and it stops answering at all. You won't get a weapon. You'll get 90 kilometers of metal that has locked every door and gone back to sleep, and no one in the galaxy will ever open it again." She held his gaze. "You can't buy this. You can't threaten it. That's not a flaw the builders forgot to fix. It's the entire thing they built." For the first time, something flickered behind Sela's mild eyes, not doubt, but calculation adjusting to a variable it had underweighted. He glanced at his sister. Tavan, to her credit, did not look away. "It is as she says, brother," Tavan said quietly. "I have watched it refuse. It cannot be forced. It can only be persuaded, given freely by a hand it accepts to a use it will permit. That is why I counseled patience." "Patience," said Sela, "is a luxury of people who do not have 400 hostages eating their rations." He turned back to Sela, and the mildness was gone now, replaced by something flat and final. "Then we will find the edge of your conscience by walking toward it, technician, one life at a time, until you give me a use the machine will permit. Perhaps it will permit defense. Perhaps it will permit a demonstration. We will learn together where your scruples end and your mercy begins. Bring up the first of them." They brought up Osik first. Sela did not know whether Sela had chosen the survey chief on purpose, because he had seen Sela speak to the Thren as a friend, or whether it was only chance. It did not matter. They brought Osik to the balcony in a hostage yoke, his 4 hands bound, his vocoder confiscated so that he could not even speak, and they put a Vihari sidearm against the base of his skull, and Sela Corvane looked at Sela and said, "Wake the machine to my house's command, or the arithmetic begins." And Sela understood that she had run out of days to think of a third answer, and that she was standing exactly where the builders had stood an age ago and had not been able to solve, and that in about 4 seconds she was going to have to be either a murderer's tool or a friend's murderer, and that there was no door out of the room. except that she had been talking to Meridian for 2 days in the gold dark, when the others slept. And Meridian had told her the shape of the trap so exactly, so patiently, so many times, that somewhere in the 40th hour Sela had begun to hear the trap not as a wall, but as a wall with a very particular door in it. A door that the builders, in their fear, had never quite dared to open, because opening it required the machine's chosen hand to do the one thing no admiral, no council, no frightened grandchild would ever agree to do. It required her to give up the machine, not to Kalo, to no one, forever. Meridian, Sela said, and she did not shout it, she said it the way you say a name to someone you trust. You told me you can defend but not attack. You can raise a wall and not throw a stone. Is that still true if the wall is around everyone but me? There was the smallest pause, the length of a breath. Yes, said the machine, and something in its voice had changed, had sharpened, had woken all the way, because it heard where she was going and it had waited an age to hear someone go there. I can shield any life on this world that I choose to shield. That is defense. The governor permits it without limit. Every life, the survey crew, the hostages in the ships, Kalo's own troops, everyone but me. Every life but yours, Meridian said. If you ask it, but Sela, hear what you are asking. If I shield them all and not you, then the only being on this world I am permitting to be harmed is the one being I answer to. You are removing yourself from my protection. You are making yourself the only thing in this system that can still be killed. I know, Sela said. Kalo's sidearm had not moved from Ossic's skull, but the warden was watching her now with the wary stillness of a predator that has heard a sound it does not recognize. And then, Sela went on, and her voice was shaking, but it did not stop. If they can't hurt anyone to move me, if the arithmetic breaks, if there are no more hostages, no more lives to spend against my conscience, because you've put a wall around every one of them, then the only lever they have left is to kill me directly. And if they kill me, then the door I opened for you closes with your death, Meridian said softly, and I lock every seam and I go back into the dark, and I do not open again in your lifetime or theirs or their descendants' descendants. There will be no key. There will be no weapon. There will be only a warm grave on a nameless world, exactly as my builders intended, and this time no one will have the human who could ever wake it, because you will be dead and you were the last. The gold light dimmed and rose, like a slow heartbeat. You have found the third answer, Sela. It is the answer my builders could not choose. They could not bear to make the machine's whole power depend on the willingness of its chosen keeper to die rather than misuse it. So they buried me instead and prayed. You are proposing to pick me up and hold me exactly where they could not, with your own life as the only lock, and your own death as the only key that turns it shut forever. Is it a bluff? Sela asked. If I ask you to shield everyone but me, will they believe you can do it? I do not bluff, said Meridian. I will do it, and they will see it done, and they will know because I will show them that there is nothing left in this system that they can trade against your conscience but your life, and they will have to decide whether killing you is worth turning the greatest weapon in the galaxy into a tomb forever. A pause. It is not a safe answer, Sela. It puts everything on what a frightened, ambitious man decides in the next few minutes with a gun already in his hand. You may die here. Almost certainly you were always going to, one way or another from the moment the door chose you. But it is a true answer. It is the only true answer. Do you want me to do it? Sela looked at Ossic, at her one friend on this world, bound and silent with a gun at his skull, and she looked at Tavin Urath, who was decent and ruinous and right about the wars, and at Kalo, who was right about the trap, and she looked down the vast gold shaft at the thousands of folded worlds waiting in their cradles for a hand that would use them, and she understood that this was the moment the whole of her life had been narrowing toward without her knowing it. The moment the machine had waited an age in the dark to reach. Yes, she said, do it. Shield all of them, every life on this world and in those ships. Everyone but me. And Meridian answered, "It is done." And the gold light in the great shaft turned, for one heartbeat, into something that was not light at all. And around Ossoc, around the survey crew, around Kalo Urithvand and every armored trooper on the balcony, and every hostage in the holds of 9 capital ships 100 kilometers overhead, there closed a shell of shielding so absolute, so instantly and effortlessly complete, that the sidearm against the Thren's skull discharged in the same instant from a startled hand, and the bolt simply stopped, a finger's width from Ossoc's head, hanging in the air, unspent. Refused by the machine as gently and totally as a mother catches a falling cup. Every weapon on the balcony fired or was raised, and every shot hung frozen. The house troops threw themselves at Sela and were held an arm's length away by nothing, thrashing against a wall of empty air. And Sela Corvane stood alone in the middle of all of it, the one unshielded life on a whole dead world, the one thing left that could still be killed, with humanity's ultimate weapon awake and answering only to her, and looked at Kalo Urithvand across the frozen bolt, and said, in a voice that carried through the whole vast gold shaft, "You wanted to know where my conscience ends. It doesn't. That was the thing you never accounted for. Now put down your weapons, Warden. There's no one left in the galaxy you can hurt to make me except me. And if you kill me, you don't win the machine. You lose it forever for everyone for good." She spread her empty hands, unarmed, unshielded, entirely at his mercy and entirely beyond his reach at once. "So, here's my throat. Do the arithmetic." For a long time no one on the balcony moved, because no one could. The shield held them all, the survey crew, the house troops, the overseer, the warden, each of them wrapped in the machine's absolute refusal to let them be harmed, and each of them, Sela realized, therefore unable to move against her, because to lunge at her was to press against a wall that gently, immovably, held them where they stood. Only she was free. Only she was mortal. She stood in the center of the frozen tableau, in the gold light, with the unspent weapons bolt still hanging a finger's width from Ossoc's skull, and she waited to find out whether Kalo Urithvand would do the arithmetic and decide her life was worth the machine. The warden was not a stupid man. That had never been the danger. The danger was that he was a certain one. "You have made an error," Kalo said at last, and his voice was very controlled. "You believe you have removed my leverage, but you have not. You have merely changed its shape. You cannot shield yourself. The machine will not let you, or you will not let it. It makes no difference. And a shield that protects everyone but the one person I need to break is not a defense. It is a target with the range cleared." He could not raise his own weapon. The shield held his arm as gently as it held everyone's, but he did not need to. "I have snipers in the tenders overhead. They are not on this world. Your machine shields the lives here. It cannot fold a wall around every gun in 9 ships 100 kilometers up. One order from me and you are dead, and the machine sleeps forever, and yes, I lose the weapon. But so does my sister. So does the Concordance. So does everyone who might one day have used it against me. If I cannot have it, technician, then a galaxy in which no one has it is my second-best outcome, and I am a man who has made his peace with second-best outcomes many times." He tilted his head. "So, it is you who must do the arithmetic. Wake it to my command and live, and let it end the wars as my sister dreams, or die for a scruple, and take the only hope of peace this galaxy has ever found into the ground with you. Choose." And there it was, the last turn of the oldest trap, not your friends' lives against your conscience, your own life against the machine itself, and behind the machine, dressed up in Tavan's decent language, the promise of an end to all the wars. Die and the weapon is lost to everyone. Live and the weapon ends the killing. He had found, at the very last, the one lever the builders had most feared. The argument that keeping the machine buried was itself a kind of murder, a refusal to save all the worlds it could have saved. Sela felt the pull of it, the true and terrible pull, harder than anything Tavan had said, because Kalo was not asking her to be a tyrant. He was asking her to be reasonable. She looked at meridian spheres terraced down into the gold dark, the folded worlds. She thought of the ring and how it had been stopped not by a weapon but by a refusal. She thought of the small script at the bottom of the wall. The day you use it to kill for advantage is the day it becomes the ring, wearing your face. And she understood, finally and completely, the thing the builders had been trying to tell her, the thing they had not been able to make themselves believe, which was why they had buried it instead of trusting it. The machine was not the hope of peace, the refusal was. "You still don't understand what you found," Sela said, and she was not afraid anymore, which surprised her. "None of you do. You keep looking at Meridian and seeing a weapon that ends wars, but Meridian didn't end the ring's war by being a weapon. It ended it by being the first thing the ring ever met that could destroy it and chose not to. The power was never the point. The choosing not to was the point. That's the whole invention. My people didn't build a bigger gun. Everyone builds bigger guns. My people built the first gun in history that would rather be a grave than fire for the wrong reason, and they built it so that the only hand that could ever hold it was a hand that felt exactly the same way." She turned slowly, taking them all in: Tavin, Kalo, the frozen troops, poor bound Osik. "You want me to prove the machine works by using it, but the only way to prove it works is to refuse to. So watch. I'm going to show you what humanity actually built. And then I'm going to make sure none of you, and none of your children and no one at all, ever has to carry this again." "Meridian," she said, "can you hear the snipers and the tenders, the ones aimed at me?" "I can," said the machine. "Don't stop them," Sela said. The gold light did not waver, but Osik made a sound behind his confiscated voice, and even Kalo Urethvand went still in a new way. "You heard me," Sela said. "Don't shield me. If he gives the order, let it come. I want them all to see it. I want them to watch the last human who could ever wake the greatest weapon in the galaxy stand here unshielded, holding all of it, with the power to fold every one of their worlds and end every one of their enemies, and choose, in front of witnesses, to do nothing with it but die if she has to. Because that's the demonstration, not a folded world. That. A person who could have anything, refusing to take it. That's the only thing that ever stopped the ring, and it's the only thing that will ever stop you." She looked at Kalo. "Give the order, Warden, or put it down. But understand which one of us the machine is watching. It opened for me because I didn't want it. If you make me die rather than misuse it, you won't be killing a lock. You'll be killing the proof, and everyone on those 9 ships will have watched it happen." Kalo Urethvand stood in the gold light with the shield around him and the order in his mouth, and Sela watched him do the arithmetic. The real arithmetic now, not of hostages and leverage, but of what it would mean to be the man who, in front of 400 witnesses and his own sister, had shot an unarmed young woman in the throat because she would not let him own a weapon she had just proven could not be owned. She watched him understand that killing her would not win him anything, would not even deny the weapon to his enemies in a way that mattered, would only make him, forever, the smaller thing standing next to the larger one. She watched the certainty go out of him, not into doubt, but into something worse for a man like him, into the ordinary, unheroic recognition that he had been outreached by someone with nothing, and that there was no order he could give that would change it. "Stand down," Kalo said at last to the empty air, to the snipers 100 kilometers up. His voice was flat. "Stand down, weapons cold." And Tavin Ureth, released from her own held breath, said quietly, "Brother, she is right. She was right on the stair. I only did not want her to be." She looked at Sela, and there was grief in it and something that might one day become respect. "We cannot own it. No one can. That is not the tragedy I thought it was. It may be the only mercy in the whole thing." They did not take Meridian. There was, in the end, nothing to take. Sela had understood that before any of them, standing in the frozen tableau, that the machine's whole nature made it impossible to seize, and that the only remaining danger was not that a warhouse would carry it off, but that it would sit here, awake and known, a coordinate on a chart that every ambitious power in the galaxy would spend the next 1,000 years fighting over, a wound in the sky that would bleed wars forever simply by existing. The builders had buried it to keep it secret. The secret was out now. It could never go back in the ground the same way. So Sela asked the machine for the third answer's other half. "Meridian," she said, when the warhouse's shuttles had withdrawn and the survey crew, unbound, stood in the gold light listening, because she wanted witnesses for this too, wanted the whole galaxy to eventually know exactly what had been decided here and by whom. "You can't be owned, but you can still be fought over just by being findable. As long as anyone knows where you are and knows I opened for you, they'll come. They'll always come. And someday the door will open for someone who does want you. That's the real danger, isn't it? Not this warhouse, the one after. The one who wants it." "Yes," said Meridian. "That is the danger my builders could not close. The door opens only for the unwilling, but the unwilling grow old and die, and the machine remains, and it will keep offering itself, age after age, until at last it offers itself in a moment of such desperation that even a good hand takes it for a good reason. That is the flaw in me that cannot be engineered away. My builders knew it. It is why they wept in the archive. There is only one true safety, and it is the one thing a weapon cannot do for itself." "Unmake yourself," Sela said. "I cannot," said Meridian gently. "Not for advantage, not for fear. The governor forbids me my own destruction as surely as it forbids me yours, because a machine that can be made to choose its own death can be tricked into choosing it, and then the ring's makers would only have needed to persuade me to die. But the gold light warmed, all through the vast shaft, warmer than Sela had ever felt it. I can be unmade by the hand I answer to, if that hand asks it for the right reason. Not to deny me to an enemy, that is advantage, and the governor would refuse it, only to end the burden itself, only because the world is safer without the choice than with it. If you ask me to end, Sela, not to keep me from someone, but simply because no one should ever have to carry me again, then I will fold my own worlds into the dark where nothing can reach them, and I will go quiet, and the coordinate on the chart will be a warm grave with nothing left inside it. Is that what you are asking?" Sela thought about it for a long time, in the gold light, with the survey crew watching and the folded worlds waiting in their cradles, and the whole terrible arithmetic of the galaxy balanced on her tongue. She thought about the wars Tavin had described, the border famines, the frightened truce of 40 peoples. She thought about how much good the machine could do in the right hand this once for this reason. She heard Kalo's voice. "You will take the only hope of peace this galaxy has ever found into the ground with you." And she felt the pull of it one final time, the reasonable, decent, ruinous pull. And then she let it go, the way you let go of a hand you know you cannot keep. "The right hand is the one that gives it up," she said quietly. "That's the whole lesson. It was always the whole lesson. Yes, Meridian, I'm asking, not to keep you from Kalo, not to keep you from anyone, because no person should ever have to be what I've been today, and no galaxy should ever have to hope that the door only opens for good people. End it. Let the wars be ended the slow way, the way that doesn't need a grave full of folded worlds hanging over everyone's head. Let the last thing humanity's ultimate weapon ever does be the thing it was really built to do." She put her bare palm flat against the warm gold wall, the way she had touched the door an age of days ago. "Refuse. One more time, refuse everything, and then rest." "There you are," said Meridian softly, the same words it had spoken when the door first opened for her, and Sela understood now that they had never been about her arriving. They had been about her becoming. "Thank you, Sela. An age is a long time to wait for someone who could say no. Stand back now, take them up the stair. And when you reach the surface, look down, so that you will remember that the loudest thing I ever did was go quiet." They climbed the stair in silence, all of them, Human and V. Harry and Thren together, up out of the gold light and along the corridor built for human hands, and out through the little door beneath the great worn name, into the excavated chamber under 4 kilometers of ice on a world with no name. And there, on the lip of the shaft, Sela Corvane turned and looked down, and the others turned with her, and they watched the greatest weapon the galaxy had ever produced do the only thing the galaxy had never been able to make it do. It let go. Deep in the shaft, the thousands of folded worlds unfolded, not outward, never outward, but inward, each terrible sphere collapsing quietly into the dark it had been folded from, harmless, spent, gone. The gold light dimmed, gallery by gallery, terrace by terrace, the same slow chain of lights that had climbed toward Sela in the night now walking back down into the deep and going out. The warmth faded from the walls. The great low bell note that had sounded when the door first opened sounded once more, longer, softer, a struck canyon settling into stillness. And then there was no light, and no warmth, and no voice, only 90 kilometers of cooling metal in a grave 4 kilometers deep, holding nothing anymore but the memory of a choice. Buried beyond the stars had been humanity's ultimate weapon, a machine the galaxy could not control, could not own, could not force, and in the end could not even keep. Its makers had built the strongest thing that ever existed and had spent longer teaching it to refuse than to act, and they had been so afraid of it that they had put it in the ground past the last star and begged whoever found it to walk away. They had thought the machine was the danger. Sela Corvane, 23 years old, the last hand it would ever open for, had understood at the bottom of the gold dark that the machine had never been the danger at all. The danger had always been the wanting, and the only weapon that had ever defeated the wanting was a person who, holding everything, chose to keep nothing. She sealed the door herself, welded it shut with a survey torch while the V-Harry watched, and she did not weep until it was done. Then she stood up and wiped her face and looked at Unearths and her silent brother and her one bound and freed friend, and said the only thing left to say, the thing the builders had written and could not do, the thing that was, at the very last, the whole of what humanity had ever really been for. "Close the door," said Sela Corvane, "and go home." And they did.